Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video I will be talking about some of my recent favorite books. I used to do this type of video a couple months back. It's been a while since I've done this video, but it was just called Recent Favorite Books, and I would just talk about some books that I have read recently that I have really loved or that have stood out to me. Typically I used to do it every 3 months. Back then I was reading a lot, so I had a lot more books to talk about. Now I'm not reading as much, so I feel like this type of video is kind of pointless because I'm not reading enough books to have new favorites, especially every 3 months. It's really not realistic. I think I've only given one book 5 stars so far this year, and I've read like 60 books. This is somewhat of a preview to my mid-year book freakout tag that I will be doing in July, because I want to have all of June to read stuff before I go and do the tag. I just feel like I won't really have much to talk about in the tag if I do one now, and I like to do it directly in the middle of the year, which is July something, so that'll be coming later. But I just wanted to have an excuse to talk about some books that I'm really loving and that I can't stop thinking about. I'm gonna get started, I guess. So the only 5-star book that I've had so far this year, I think, which I'm now wondering if I should give the other ones I'm going to talk about 5 stars as well, but I feel like I rated them what I rated them. I can't take it back. But the 5-star read that I do have is Call Me Crazy by Melanie Harlow. This I flippin' loved. I feel like I either read this in January, February, but I loved this. This was so good. This is my favorite Melanie Harlow book so far. I absolutely loved it. It had so many of my favorite tropes just mixed together and wrapped in this very pretty, perfect bow. It was just so good, and I feel like if you really love romance tropes, like if you're a trope person, you need to check out Melanie Harlow, especially the Bellamy Creek series and her Cloverleaf Farm series. They're full of great tropes. So this particular book follows Enzo and Bianca, who have kind of grown up together. Their families were pretty close. They're both big Italian families. They've always kind of disliked each other. They've always had a little bit of like hate to love, rivals to lovers. Enzo essentially needs a wife to take over the family business. They kind of are tired of him not settling down, so he decides that he needs a temporary wife that he can divorce in a couple of years. And Bianca is desperately wanting her own baby. She really wants to have a child, to have her own family. So Bianca and Enzo decide that they're going to team up. They're going to have this fake wedding, and Enzo is going to give her a baby. And that is like part of their contract that they've decided, is that they can do that for each other and then go their separate ways in a couple of years. Obviously Enzo will still be a father, but at least they won't be completely tied together. This plan makes sense to the both of them and they totally go for it. But obviously they slowly end up falling in love. They build such a beautiful friendship too. Like, it's not just that they suddenly see each other in a different light. It's more like they build this strong bond and this strong friendship. They kind of team up against their families. At the same time, they both are getting what they want, but obviously they do feel guilty about lying. It's also a small town romance. There's a great group of friends, Marriage of Convenience, Contract Baby, and as I said, Hate to Love. It's just so good, and I wish more people would read this because I flippin' loved it. It made me just feel so warm and fuzzy. I loved the romance. I loved the characters. Enzo and Bianca were just great together. I really loved their romantic development, but I also loved their development as solo characters. It was just so cute, and I highly recommend it. The next one is My Midnight Moonlight Valentine by J.J. McAvoy. Also the sequel, My Sunrise Sunset Paramour. These titles sometimes are very confusing to me. I sometimes forget them. This is also the old cover, so the new cover is a little different. So far there are only 2 books out in this series, but I am obsessed with them. This is a paranormal, somewhat historical romance. It is so good. It is so good. I wish more people would read it. This follows our female character, Druella, who is a new vampire, and she kind of just lives her life normally. She goes to work, she has a job, and she just doesn't really associate with other vampires. She's kind of just solo on her own. And one day she goes hunting in the forest because of course she doesn't eat humans. She comes across this man who has slaughtered a bunch of people, and he is naked and kind of confused. He claims that he's lost some of his memory, but he recognizes Druella and thinks that she is his mate. Druella is confused. She's like, I've never met you before. Like, I don't know why you think I'm your mate. And so they kind of team up to figure out what has happened to him. Yeah, he's lost his memory for the last century. So they team up to find out how and why and what's going on. There are witches in here as well, and there's a lot of history elements too that I really loved. It's such a fantastic vampire romance. I highly recommend it. I loved the romance. I loved the characters. A little bit more of a slow burn, but like fated mates, definitely friends to lovers. By the way, I love their names. Druella and Theseus. I'm obsessed. Beautiful. Druella is definitely drawn to him. So she does feel like there is a connection, but she just doesn't know and like doesn't understand what it is. I loved Theseus. He was very protective, very badass, but he also had a very soft side. He wasn't afraid to show emotion and to be real with Druella. He's super protective of her though, like super. I really loved that. Like all he wanted to do was protect her and keep her safe. But she's also very badass herself. Like she can stand her ground. She's super powerful. I don't want to spoil things obviously, but she's a powerful vampire. This series is mainly about Druella. Like Druella has her moment in this series. And I feel like at the end of the day, it's truly about her and her journey and like what she's capable of and like who she is. But I love them together. I think they're a great couple and definitely like one of my favorite paranormal couples for sure. And I also loved the second book and like I need the third book ASAP. I also feel like JJ McAvoy did a lot of research. She did a lot of great character building, gave them backgrounds, gave them personalities. Theseus' family is so interesting. I love them. They are so funny. They have such unique names and they're so cool. I'm obsessed with this series and I am dying for the third book. I don't know how many books are going to be in this series. Definitely recommend it if you love paranormal romances, but if you maybe want to try paranormal romance and you haven't read a lot of it, highly recommend this. It was so good and I'm gonna keep repeating the same words because it's just good. I don't know what else to say. So the next ones are a series. I normally wouldn't talk about books that I haven't talked about in a wrap up yet, but two of them I did read this month already and I can't wait. Like I need to talk about it now. The first book I have talked about in my wrap up and that is Thoughtless by S.C. Stevens. I finished the whole trilogy. I also just realized I have not hauled these yet. I finished this trilogy and I loved it. I loved it so much. It has been a couple of days since I finished it. I think it's been almost a week actually, and I can't stop thinking about it. I haven't been able to read anything else because I just keep thinking about these characters. Thoughtless, I read years ago. I think I read it in 2015. And I didn't end up liking it. I gave it 3 stars and I considered unhauling it at one point. I just didn't really care. I was like, whatever, like this is decent. It's not anything special, but I also didn't hate it. I just didn't care. I was talking to a friend on Instagram, Melissa. She was reading some books that were kind of similar and she said that it reminded her of Thoughtless and it kind of inspired me to reread this book. I was like, why haven't I reread that yet? I've been wanting to reread it to see if I would feel differently now because I did mention this in a video I did years ago called Books and Authors I Want to Give a Second Chance. So I had every intention of rereading this at some point and that talk with Melissa just made me want to reread it. So I was like, I'm just gonna reread it. And I picked it up and I could not stop reading it. And I became obsessed. I think one of the many reasons why I didn't like it back in the day, as I said in my May wrap up, I was reading a lot of similar books to this and it didn't feel like anything special or unique. It didn't stand out to me. I haven't read something like this in a very long time, so that could be why I love it more. Or it's because I understand Kira more this time around. If you haven't read the Thoughtless series, this follows Kira, who moves across the country with her boyfriend Denny. They move in with one of Denny's old kind of high school friends, I guess. Denny is working at his dream job and Kira is about to start school at this top university. So they move in with Kellen, who is this local rock star. He's a musician. And then something happens where Denny has to kind of leave for his job, and that leaves Kira alone with Kellen. Kira suddenly starts feeling more for Kellen and she starts depending on him. Kira is still dating Denny. They're not broken up or anything, but she ends up falling in love with Kellen. This book is obviously about cheating, but I loved it. I loved it so much more this time around. I can't believe I didn't like it the first time I read it. Even though you're rooting for Kellen, Denny is still a great guy. Like, he's still a good guy, and that's why you feel, or in my case, I felt so sorry for Kira. I was like, how could she decide? Like, how can she hurt both of them, first of all, and also like pick and hurt herself? Like, either way, she would have lost one of them at one point. Like, you know what I mean? If she picked Denny, she would have lost Kellen. If she picked Kellen, she would have lost Denny. Obviously, it's very dramatic. It's very back and forth. Kira is like only 22, so she's still like really young, and I feel like if I were in that position, I would probably be confused a lot. And I mean, Denny is the only boyfriend she's ever had, and so I just understand like why she felt so confused and why it was really hard for her to make a decision. I mean, she was just scared. She was so scared, and I totally get it. Like, I totally get it. So yeah, I did end up reading the second book, Effortless, and the third book, Reckless, which I will obviously talk about in my June wrap up eventually, and I have yet to haul these, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to talk about the series. I loved book 2. I'm trying to think which one is my favorite out of the series. I feel like it could be number 2, but it might be number 3. I have a lot to say about book 3. I don't really want to spoil things, but at the same time, I feel like I have so many things to discuss. So maybe if you haven't read the series, maybe don't watch the rest of this video, because this is the last books that I'm talking about for this video. But just know I really, really loved it. And I gave them all 4 stars, by the way. Effortless follows Kira and Kellen trying to move on with their relationship and like trying to finally have a normal relationship, and also dealing with their guilt and the aftermath of hurting Denny. Kira and Kellen have another obstacle in their life, and it's something that they have to now really put their relationship to the test and really see if they can trust each other. And I thought that was so interesting about this book. I started reading it and it got to like a certain part where it really tested their relationship, and they both got extremely mad at each other. And they're like, well, I don't trust you and you don't trust me. And I just realized how insecure they were because they started their relationship off by cheating. They have so much baggage with how they started falling in love with each other and how that situation affects their relationship going forward. Denny would be back in the picture in a way. I kind of knew that. I had a feeling. Obviously not surprised that Kellen was upset about things. I'm trying to be as vague as possible with also discussing the book because I really want to discuss it. I loved the ending. The ending was so cute and just so perfect and so them. And then we have the third and final book, which is Reckless. I do know that there is another book that is Thoughtless, but in Kellen's point of view. I probably won't read that. If not, I'll read it in like many, many years. This I loved, but it made me angry. I was so mad at certain parts in this book, specifically when Kellen had to film a music video. I literally felt like puking. I was reading that and I was like, I'm gonna puke. Like, I feel so sick. Like, to me, that was like, Kira is really standing by her man. She is stronger than I could ever be. So Kellen's band, the D-Bags, they have a record deal now, and they're making it big. They're about to tour, and Kira joins Kellen on tour. So they're together now 24/7. I really love that aspect. I'm so glad she was on tour with him because A, he would have ran, and B, if he didn't, it would have just wrecked their entire relationship. I'm so glad she was there standing by his side, trying to support him as best as she can. If Kira wasn't encouraging Kellen, he obviously would have never done any of those things, and he would have just left. Like, he would have ran. Like we saw in the first couple chapters, he would have been gone. But Kira was like, no, this is your dream. You need to do all these things because this is your dream, and I will stand beside you. I don't like it, and I know you don't like it, but you have to do this for your dream because I don't want you to give it up for me. And I was just like, oh, Kira is so mature in those moments. To me, they really did grow. They really grew into these more mature adult characters. They started making more rational adult decisions. Kira was really trying to stand by Kellen as much as she could and tried to support him. I mean, she knows him better than anybody does, so she knew how hard everything was on him. I also love his whole like family thing. I don't want to spoil things, but that just broke my heart, all of that. I mean, Kellen has always struggled with people loving him and with knowing that people care about him. And for this whole series, you see him slowly realize how much the people in his life actually care about him and actually love him, and that he does have this huge support system, and it's just so beautiful. There were so many scenes in here that I wanted to cry. There was a scene where Kellen was holding a baby and Anna said to Kira, that man needs a baby. I wanted to cry in that scene because I was like, oh my god, like he, even though he had a rough childhood and he didn't have a great example of parents and a loving family, he would just still make a great father. He would be so understanding and loving, and I love that scene. I was like, oh my god, that makes me want to cry. And just like how sweet he was with the baby. I also loved the ending when he's at an award show and he's like super nervous about it, and Kira like gives him this great news and he wins the award, and he's so emotional and publicly emotional. Like, he's not afraid to share this wonderful moment and how happy he is and how grateful he is. These characters developed so well throughout the series. I loved their relationship. You know, they didn't have the greatest start. They had a very rocky start to their relationship, but they made it through and they worked on it, and they eventually trusted each other, and they just really loved each other, and they were so passionate about each other and protective and supportive. These books are really long, but you really get to see their journey. You really get to see them deal with everything. As I said, you get to see them mature and develop, and it's just so beautiful, and I'm obsessed with this series. I also really loved their relationship with Denny after everything happened. Obviously, it was very slow and they were all very wounded, but they decided that their friendship was way more important than what had happened. And even though it hurt them all, they realized that they are still very important to each other, and they worked on that, and they slowly worked through all of that, and that beautiful friendship was just great. I feel like it tied the series together very well. I also want to say I was so frustrated with Kira because I was like, why doesn't she just say that they're married? And I feel like it would have just been so much better if they would have admitted from the beginning that he was married and that they were together, and that Kira wasn't going to step aside and that she was going to be there. But of course they just pushed her aside, which I feel like they could have probably stood their ground a little bit more in that case, but like, I get it, they were new to the business, yada yada yada. So like, I understand, but also I was a little frustrated. I was like, please just stand up for yourself. Also, Kellen had so many more opportunities to expose what was going on, but I get it, they were scared and, you know, didn't want to mess things up for the band. I also think about it now, and I'm wondering why the guys didn't stand up more. They were Kellen's best friends, and yet they didn't say anything when everything was going down, and he was clearly in pain and like he was angry about things that were happening to them in his relationship. I don't know why they were like, yeah, we'll just deal with this. Like, they didn't offer to stop their tour or to leave. Like, it seemed like they were more money hungry or like fame hungry than they actually cared about Kellen. And that is something that really bothered me. I was like, why is Matt and Evan and Griffin not speaking up to the label and saying, hey, you can't do this, like, we're all gonna walk? They never said anything, and that kind of bothered me. I was like, your best friend is clearly struggling with all this, and you're just gonna sit there and let the label do that to you just because like you care more about the money and the fame. And like Kellen said from the beginning. I just want it to be about the music. Anyways, I'm obsessed with this series and I love it. I feel like I just wanted to make this whole video to talk about these guys because I loved them. I loved Kira and Kellen and the whole group. I am just obsessed with the series and I like already want to reread it. I feel like I missed so many things that I probably will have to reread it soon because I'm sure there's so many things that I did not pick up on. And I want to know if you guys have read anything else by S.E. Stevens, and if so, should I check them out? I don't know if I want to read Griffin's book, to be honest. I liked him, but I don't really know if I really care to read his book. But let me know if there is anything else by S.E. Stevens that I should check out. Let me know your feelings on this series. Just let me know all of your thoughts about the series because I'm totally down to talk more about it. Even though I feel like I said everything I wanted to say. I love these characters so much. And the romance was just so addicting and so heartbreaking yet heartwarming. As I said, these characters just matured and grew so much. And I really respected them for that. It was just fantastic. And I really loved them. I really, really loved them. So these were just some of my more recent favorite books. Let me know if you have read any of them and what your thoughts are on them. Also, let me know some of your recent favorite books. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, follow me on all my other social media, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!